Welcome, ladies, gentlemen, fellow slaves of the global plantation. The Vinny Eastwood Show is bad news. It's like the news, but worse. So much worse. It's the lighter side of genocide. Just because we're being exterminated doesn't mean we can't enjoy it. Otherwise, what's the point of being killed? The Vinny Eastwood Show, where the only thing worse than living in a high-tech global police state run by child trafficking satanists is Vinny's jokes. Seriously, so one day he's going to get a bash. Now,
where do you go after that, Vinny?
Introducing us?
We go to 3 months in prison. Now, my very special guests are joining us, including my co-accused, who's also wearing a River of Lies t-shirt. riveroflies.co.nz or .co.nz to those of you in the USS of R. We are, and we got three. There we go. There's a screenshot right there, baby. Oh, yeah. All right. Now, Billy's getting some calls.
Sorry.
Don't worry, guys. It's all good. Like I said, we're running at a 1.5 out of 10, so that could be worse. Now, today is the 2-year anniversary of our arrest, which Amy Benjamin, former law professor at Auckland University, called The Day Democracy Died. And, of course, very much justification for that persuasion because of the fact that it was such a brutal showing by the New Zealand police about their enforcement behind these lockdown measures. And indeed, Billy TK and myself, both broadcasters, generally speaking, Billy being a former police officer, former army guy, getting arrested was something kind of new. And this was spending 28 hours in solitary confinement and being charged with up to 6 months in prison for ostensibly standing within 2 meters of another person. And on top of that, we were also charged with up to 3 months in prison for refusing to give our passwords while we were in custody to our phones. Billy didn't have a password to his phone, and it unlocks normally. And my password took them 8 months to crack. They sent it down to the police in Wellington. They got the best, brightest, most highly paid, highly trained, and experienced personnel to try and crack that iPhone.
Wasn't your password Vinny123?
No. They'd managed to crack the password. It was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Now, we don't want to accuse the New Zealand police of being incompetent or any kind of aspersions towards their level of grace and dutiful commitment to their jobs. We don't want to do that. What we do want to do, though, is acknowledge the contributions of the arresting officers, not only to the arrest themselves, but the trial and their testimony afterwards. In particular, the man I'm calling Black Curran, otherwise known as Luke Curran, who's, for the record, is a white guy. Now, the thing about this guy is you talk about a person who is on the stand saying that he felt that he had clearly explained the piece of paper that he was trying to read out to us. By explain, he meant he threw it at it from a couple of feet away through a crowd. All right. Now, I didn't go to school that long. I think I repeated my last year of school in order to get my USBC, but maybe the definition of explained is somewhat different in the New Zealand police these days. And on top of that, when we were sent to trial after 6 weeks of absolutely no internet access and not being able to even leave the house and having bail checks at all hours of the day and night, that was very stressful. Then we've got thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars of lawyer bills to deal with and not even being able to talk to each other for more than a year. The police even opposed our bail in the first place and wanted to remand us in custody until trial. Indefinitely. It could have been just like those poor people in Canada, some of which are spending 520 days in prison without being able to go to court yet. Okay? This is a global thing, and we're just the New Zealand example of it. And that's why New Zealand is so important, because you get to understand the global scheme if you understand what's going on here on the ground. And I believe that the documentary will go some way to explain that. And this trial that has taken place under the presiding judge Peter Winter, seemed to be very long and slow and arduous and expensive, and resulted in 4 months prison for Billy and 3 months prison for me. And we're out on appeal for several months while we await the High Court, and now we're out on appeal for another couple of months while we again await the High Court decision. And the first time since we were arrested, there is actually seems to be cause for hope. I hope that there is going to be recognition that New Zealanders' rights and democracy in general is very important and protected by law. On the other hand, if that doesn't happen, then people know that this country is lost, and as we said during the election in 2020, needs to be reclaimed. And a final point on this, there was an argument by my lawyer that this has caused a chilling effect. Now, for me, maybe, quite likely, has caused a chilling effect, maybe for Billy too. But since we were arrested, there are a whole bunch of new alternative radio personalities who weren't there beforehand. And now they are. And they are telling the truth about all sorts of things all over the airwaves that they can find. And there are now all sorts of freedom parties as well, trying to come up from out of the grassroots. And we've preceded these actions by months and years. And it's good to see that something is coming of it. What if there was no chilling effect? What if it fanned the brush fires in the minds of men?
Silence of the Lambs. Just had to say that.
I appreciate that summing up, Vinny. I think you've, in a very dignified and proper way, brought everything in front of us without being overly emotional, and you've been very, very realistic. One little thought came to me. If you were going to the High Court, is there any opportunity for you to have a jury so that the peers, fellow Kiwis, can sit in on this business and have a good hard look at what on earth's been going on? Because none of us in our right mind and stability would see that what's happened to you two as being acceptable. This is surely the jury. You're entitled to be reviewed by your peers.
I think technically yes. Yeah. However, we've never gone through that. Maybe Billy knows more about this than I do.
Yeah. So once you go into an appeal situation in the High Court, the jury issue is out of it. It's a determination around the quality of the application of the law, and that's determined by the legal mind, not a jury of peers. And so that's gone. I mean, my electoral charges court case is a jury, and I'm happy about that, as long as they're not all plants. But I'm happy about the idea that there's a jury of my peers to look at the evidence that we've got, and we were talking about it this morning. And really, once we present our evidence, that should be the end of the matter immediately.
Yes. Yes, I was standing close by you at the time, and there was nothing of any nature which was socially unacceptable or offensive or in any way against what most Kiwis would consider normal human behaviour, normal response. You were just being yourselves. You weren't upsetting anybody. You weren't offending anyone. I'm prepared to testify and swear on the Bible that, in fact, I found your behaviour completely acceptable.
Oh, and, well, no, I'm a serial hugger.
Really where a jury would go with it.
I'm a serial hugger. You know, at the appeal in the High Court, the Crown prosecutor, the police prosecutor, said to the High Court judge, "We've got footage of Mr. Tekahika hugging people and being hugged, and this is, you know, I mean, that's how petty, pathetic, cruel, stupid it was. We've got footage of Mr. Tekahika, the appellant, being hugging people and being hugged and giving hugs."
Billy, it was just lovely to see you on the day. It really was. You two are practitioners of free speech. You represent everything that I consider decent about Kiwis who are willing to go past, you know, just conventional chit-chat about nonsense. You're willing to engage on anything. And I found you both to be open-minded and very reasonable. And everyone else there at the day, I mean, what was 80 or 90 of us, whatever, we were having a nice time. The sun was out. We were chatting, rubbing shoulders, sharing the same air, may I dare. We were breathing the same air and standing in the same place, and hidden in the background was this force, this force that suddenly marched out, you know. Weird, very weird, because we were in a place of gathering. We were not obstructing traffic or the passers-by. The atmosphere was actually quite buoyant, almost the spring atmosphere. And really, the speeches, no one was being profane or saying nasty things. The speeches were well considered. I'm talking about myself, but I listened to the others. Nothing offensive. This is what we need in New Zealand, is this kind of rising up of people allowed to express their ideas, because there's no other way of telling if someone's an idiot or not unless they speak in public and you say, well, you know, I don't want that. It's your choice. But honestly, you guys, I was there because I stood with you, even though, and I won't go on too long, I did have two policemen come knocking at my door. Mr. Newman, I opened the door. What do you want? Well, here's a letter. I said, I don't need your letter. They shoved it through the door, and it was warning me not to come to any such events.
Wow. Have you got a copy of that?
I'll have a look at my file. At the time, I can't remember. But I mean, my family were behind me, and my wife's like, what are the policemen coming to the door? You know, what have you done? I said, let's have a look at the letter. And it was just warning me not to, you know, under some act or other, which isn't binding on me at all. It was their act. I didn't participate in it. I hadn't even consented to it. So without, you know, it says policing by consent on their website, and I hadn't consented to any of their stuff. So I thought, well, that obviously is irrelevant. So I just said, I'm going down to meet my friends, and this is the only way in New Zealand that we can make, you know, our children feel that we are responsible, by standing up, not by hiding behind the door and climbing under the bed and running away, but standing up together and speaking openly about matters that need to be addressed, for goodness sake. And I've seemed to be in quite good health. I mean, look, guys, we all breathed the same air at the time. Woo! And we're all in the pink of health, aren't we? I mean, putting you in solitary and doing that, just keeping you away from the sunshine, they're endangering your health just by doing that, you know, keeping you away from your normal, natural daily life. But really, we were doing what was right, honest, just, and normal by any Kiwi standards, especially those who fought and died in the First and Second World War for the very freedom that we honour. How's that?
Yeah, and it's not just World War I and II. It's Korea, it's Burma, it's Vietnam, it's Malay.
All that, you know, I know.
Iraq, Afghanistan, East Timor, you know, all those deployments. into combat theatres beyond peacekeeping roles.
That's it.
The point I'd pick up on, actually, Vinny, that you mentioned is that we don't want to cast aspersions upon the police. Well, I want to talk about that, because you mentioned the police trying to have a go at us for the password denial to the police, right? Now, what happened with me? I had a Chinese detective try and come up to my cell wearing a mask, speaking to me through a plastic hole in the cell. And he says to me, I want the password to your phone. I said to him, look, there is no password to the phone. He goes, what? And I said, there is no password to the phone. And I said, do you understand what I'm telling you? Yeah. I want the password to the phone. And I said to him, no. Listen carefully. There is no password on the phone. And he went, oh, yeah, okay. And he walked away. And the next day when I got up, my charge sheet had been updated to include refusing access to a digital device, and again, which is more added on. That policeman had blatantly lied, saying that I had denied them access. The fact is, there was no PIN number on it. There was no, in fact, to my embarrassment, because I didn't know how to put one on. Yeah. I didn't. There was no security entrance into or key required to get into the thing. But the thing that astounds me is that he lied. He lied on his notebook. Which he wrote. He would have had to have kept the diary off. Now, what happened was, my lawyer requested that policeman take the stand, and my lawyer was relishing the opportunity to get this guy on the stand and roast him like a rotisserie chicken at the local takeaway shop. And the perjury, the lying that would have happened, and he would have been found out. So what happened was the police suddenly mysteriously withdrew those charges, and I picked up my phone, which they had broken, just like Vinny's phone, and sure enough, we filmed myself taking it out of the evidence bag and turning it on, and sure enough, there was no PIN code on there. Now, the fact is that we're now finding, since then, more and more evidence of corrupt police behaviour, ranging from detectives that are handling cases of, like that young lady that got ripped out by her hair from the Parliament protest, half with wearing a bikini that she lost the top part of, and the case officer, detective sergeant, got caught out blatantly failing to declare who one of the three assaulting officers, who the third one was, to try and hide him, because he's already under Police Complaints Authority investigation for violence. And this police sergeant lied about it. The judge pointed that out, and there was no comeback on that detective sergeant for lying. And the judge acknowledged he had lied, called it a mistake, aka a lie. And that's what we're dealing with now. I tell you what, as I've made no secret, I used to smoke weed and all that as a kid, and musician and all that. No, I didn't join the police or the army to go and shoot bloody and find pot smokers of the world. It was the bad people, the freedom destroyers, the people that harm people. Those are the people I joined the police to protect the community from, and yet. Here we were in the situation where you make a declaration to enforce the law without fear or favour, without favouritism, without any hint of dishonesty. And I decided that when I joined the army and when I joined the police, that never again would marijuana pass my lips, right? Yep. While I'm in the service of the community in these capacities, it would never happen. Now, I wasn't a converted Christian then, so that's then, and no judgment on marijuana smokers at all. I mean, I don't recommend it, like I don't recommend drinking, but I certainly don't recommend ignoring the fact that P, which is the true epidemic in our country, is got to be dealt with. But the point is that what's highly acceptable in the police now are all these police officers that smoke weed. Right now, I've got a mate that just got out of the police that I joined actually, he was just ahead of me, but we were good mates. He's ex-Navy, and he's just got out, and he was a special intelligence section policeman, and he was my mate. We were mates for years. Our kids grew up together. He was Uncle Andy, and I got another mate who's in the police. He's been in the police for about 25 years now, and they can't believe how accepted in the culture of police now are all these weed smoking policemen. Now, again, not about the weed, it's about the integrity, because for me, when you've got these people lying about something like you and me, Vinny, preventing access to a digital device for the purpose of gathering evidence, which had a prison sentence attached to it, etc. Good grief. What astounds me is that we are now in a situation in the High Court appeal that we made, where we've now categorically found out that the order that was put out to lock people down on the 17th of August, which came into effect at the 18th, on the 17th at midnight, which went into the 18th, it was an unlawful order. Why was that? Because they had to gazette the order in the government gazette 48 hours before an order comes into effect. They did it in 34 minutes before it came into effect. And hold on, there's a point here. And what they needed to do in that occasion, there has to be proven, documented, process-driven steps taken to justify why an order has been made and that circumvented the 48 hours requirement. We requested that information from the Ministry of Health, from the Prime Minister's office as well, Ministry of Health and various agencies, and they don't have it. They don't have the process, the evidence, to prove that, the due process to justify circumventing the 48 hours required to gazette an order. They haven't got it, guys. They haven't got it, which means that order that they put out for the first 48 hours was unlawful. And now it's not just the charges that we're facing. The greater issue is that they have rushed into enforcement a law which they were meant to gazette. They didn't. They meant to give 48 hours. They did 34 minutes, and therefore they've got to justify it. They haven't, so it's an unlawful order. And now we've got the Crown opposing our right to challenge that order through what's called a collateral challenge. And what they're saying is now it's up to the judge to decide whether we even have the democratic process of a free society to challenge this blatantly clear pathway of a failure to follow process, which means the law is unlawful, the order is unlawful. And the thing is, we can challenge it because it's not primary law, it's what we call secondary law, which is an order, which is a sub-order into effect under the COVID-19 Public Health Response Act. So that's how bad it is, And now that's one thing. The other thing is, are our convictions can we overturn them because we're guaranteed by the Bill of Rights Act 1990, UN Convention of Human Rights, so on, so forth. And our lawyers went through it, and it was so clear that there is no limitations acceptable for any reason to prevent peaceful protest and assembly. The third point was around the sentence of jail. For me, you've only got a minor cannabis offence behind you, Vinny. And that's like, again, if it was today that you're caught with that, you wouldn't have even gone. You would have got a summons. That would have been the end of it. Would have been nothing, because they're catching people on the side of the motorway with ounces of weed, and they're letting them go now. Now,
that was the difference between you and I before we went in. You see, I've got convictions, Billy.
Yeah, I'm a man of conviction. There you go. But I'm
a man of many convictions.
Yeah, but the problem is this, though, Vinny, is Paul Borich, the King's Counsel barrister that I've got. He said to them, look, he read out my service record and my history to the judge. The judge already had it in writing. He would have been through that, and no convictions, nothing. Service, to community, blah 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 blah. And he said, and addressed the prison sentence, and the judge says to my lawyer, well, was a non-custodial sentence even discussed for Mr. Tikahika? And Paul said, well, that's the point. The Prison Services Corrections own report about me, which reads like a good character reference, basically said, if anything, a fine. If anything more serious than that, if it's not thrown out, a fine. Underneath that, maybe community detention, which is not home detention, it's community detention, where you work during the week, do your own thing, freedom of movement, as long as you're home for the weekend, which suits me because my pastor duties are during the weekend, so that's fine. But and then prison wasn't even considered, and so when the Judge Winter sentenced you, Vinny, to 3 months, me to 4 months after reducing them both by a month, the High Court judge said, well, hold on a second. That in itself is a breach of our human rights under the Sentencing Act of New Zealand, because they're meant to give us the least restrictive sentence possible based on whether our threat risk to the community and our risk of reoffending. Both are zero, because what they do is in the Sentencing Act, where they place you on it in terms of seriousness and punitive punishment is based on your threat and all that. You and I were on the bottom tier of risk and threat and all that, and yet we got 90% of the available penalty, which is a breach of the Sentencing Act. He should have gone 90% the other way, and then if he had done that, then that would have meant 6 months, let's say. And don't forget, he had a fine option available to us. He could have fined us and discharged us without conviction, and he ignored that. So what are we left to think? That this country at the moment, we've got a challenged police force that has behavioural and code of conduct and integrity problems. We've got judges that are not administering the law without fear and favour and without ideology, because as we found out with Judge Winter, he's a former Bell Gully lawyer, which is the government's crown lawyer, and he defended a paedophile found with 6,000 child porn images and got him off prison and got him home detention in 2015, and he's a Jacinda man. So there you go. That's the outlay. I wanted to get that off my chest so that people listening to this can understand what this is about, because it's by far not just about Vinny and I. It's about everybody, because the pendulum's going to swing. It's going to go conservative right soon. If we don't go red and Winston this next election, if Winston is the kingmaker again, we're in deep, deep trouble in this country, because what that is, that's a sign that, in fact, it wasn't going to go right. It's going to stay left, and the left are going to wind it up even more, make us more communistic, more authoritarian, and we're in big trouble. We would be in trouble anyway with the blue team, but done in a different way. What we will be more like about a social credit, fourth industrial revolution communist country. So whichever way, guys, we better get serious about it.
Yeah. I was thinking about this as well. I had a stack of DVDs that I made back in the day, 2008, 9 and 10, when I was going out to all these protests against the National Party government at the time under John Key. Now, these were well-attended protests and lots of them, but when the left got in charge, you could practically see tumbleweeds rolling through the street. It was just empty. Right-wingers don't protest about things. It's not the kind of people that they are. If you want people to get into large numbers and whinge and complain about things, that's what the left wing is for. So if we do have a right-wing government, you can be assured that there'll be a lot of protesting for the exact same measures that the left-wing government that they supported would bring in anyway.
Yes, exactly right. It's completely right. I mean, it's Hegelianism is what we're dealing with. I mean, there's no such thing really as left and right, and I'm trying to drum that into people. There's only right and human rights, and that's how they're doing it. The left people, think they're, because they're in the winner's circle right now, that they're always going to have the sun shining on them. That's not the way it is. It's going to swing hard right eventually, but not this election, the next one, when it will be super critical, because they may need another 3 years to establish, the climate change initiative, to establish the international health regulations, the global pandemic preparedness treaty. And once they do that, they'll be ready to go. They'll swing it hard, bang it hard on the left, and then you watch. If not this election, definitely the next election will be right.
I was thinking...
can I bring things back to...
I'm so sorry, Chris.
Right
I just
now.
need to make this point before I forget it. Because what happened was with John Key and Jacinda Ardern setting up, John Key would start the TPPA and get it signed off and whatnot, and then Jacinda would implement it. And so what we'll see, I think, if the right wing does come in control, they'll start to say, the climate is actually really important after all. And yes, you do need to live in your little 15-minute cities that are highly surveilled while you're bathed in 5G all the time, making you sterile.
Oh, well, thank you very much for going through that. What we haven't seen, Billy, because we were not at the court. We're hearing it right from your testimony of your direct experience. Plus, you've analysed the processes. Now, let's do a little bit of maths. So, the law's not being applied, but they're pretending to apply it outside of the law. To do that has to be a conspiracy. There has to be some agreement between the parties behind the scenes, the political people, the legal fraternity, and the police. There has to be some agreement to push this thing. And why is it? Why are you such a threat? Why are we such a threat just turning up at a day having a meeting together in the street? Obviously, there's a serious matter here, and that is that the illusion of the fantasy is being disrupted. The fantasy that we all have to be locked down, that we're all toxic to each other, that we're not allowed to express different ideas, that all this stuff has to be curtailed and controlled, just like in the old days when a few people used to toke a little bit. Remember those days? And they'd be thrown in prison for 18 months for half a joint found. It's the same old story. That's why I flashed this 1984 book in front of you. This is a novel which is timeless. The story is based entirely in that book on what happened in Stalin's trials, where innocent people in Russia were hauled like you two were, but it was even more cruel and more severe, and then thrown in the gulag and never seen again. Now, fortunately, at the moment, they haven't got you that far and things haven't degenerated that far, but we are on that track. It's being guided by people who understand very well social engineering. Yep. And if you're doing social engineering and creating these expensive illusions on the 6 o'clock news, even getting the churches to buy into it, so people are having to wear masks to go to church, how are they going to take communion if they've got a mask over their face? This is how extreme it's got. And the slightest threat to that illusion, which is a bunch of free people meeting in the street and talking to each other just as brothers and sisters, this is threatening, very threatening, such that they have to even break their own rules with the gazetting, as we heard. And that means there's a conspiracy. There's something going on in the background. Yep. There is a conspiracy here. We are not conspiracy theorists. We have evidence. And this is going further. So we're a terrible threat. Just by existing, we're a terrible threat because we don't believe their lies. Not only that, we seem to have the antidote, which is normal human relationships, good sense of humour. Vinny, never lose it. Keep your smile and keep that sense of humour, because we very much desperately need a bit of joy around the place. And the enemy is so serious. They hate us. They have taken a pledge to destroy us. This is going on. It's as if the political class, pulling all the resources they can under the instructions of their superiors, have declared war against us. So why would any Kiwi in their right mind ever vote for anybody who's been sitting in Wellington in the Parliament for the past 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, 18 years? Not one of them in there has ever defended any one of us. In fact, they're all in favour of injecting us with biological weapons, damaging our kids' brains, polluting the airwaves with their filthy messages, you know, and letting these child pornography people, these really filthy pederasts, get away with whatever they want because they've got money. This is the people. Why would we ever vote for any one of them again? And yet all these wonderful people who went down to Wellington and think they're freedom people are going to end up voting for these guys who were in the parliament and wouldn't come out to speak to them. That is nuts.
Yeah, and I'll tell you what.
Time to wake up, Kiwis. Don't vote for these assholes. Look for people who've got some moral integrity, who are linked in with, sorry, bad word there, but who are linked in with the local grassroots, who live with us, among us, who we can say they might represent us. And if they don't, we'll pull their chain. It's wake up time. And
well, I'll jump on that point because you raise a bloody. You raise a
I'm
really.
I'm so
good
sorry, Billy. I'm so sorry to interrupt you there, but the thing is, I just a quick story. The other day, I ordered some curry, and the people at the curry place really messed up my order. And just like the voting public, I gave them a little bit of grace because, after all, they're only cumin.
Hey, we asked for that, Billy.
That was terrible. But no, before I forget the point, because
actually, it was tandoori. But go ahead, Billy.
All right. Hey, you know, if anyone asks me, what's happening here? If anyone asks me, do you want any more jokes of Vinny? I'll just say no. I don't want. I don't want none. None, thank you. No,
oh man, those jokes are just Papa Dominant.
That's true.
Papa Dominant.
You know, it's my party and I cry if I want to. Okay, but
it's my chapati and I cry if I want to. Yeah.
Anyway, what Chris has pointed out there raises a really serious point. Number one, Winston Peters is saying he wants to get in and fix the country. That guy's had 40 years to do it. Yeah. That guy's had 40 years to fix our country, and he's failed miserably every time. It was part of the totalitarian regime in 2020. There you go, 2020.
Read this book to find out about his early days and the architecture inside his brain. It's all there.
Yeah. Right. Okay. And he's now making out that he's the end-all be-all of freedom now, freedom politics, right?
And
he's unfit. He's absolutely morally corrupt and unfit to be voted in. But even more unfit to vote for are all of the freedom political parties. Every one of them are totally unfit. Brian Tamaki, Sue Gray, Leighton Baker, Liz Gunn, Freedom and Outdoors Party, New Conservatives. Who else is there? Democracy NZ. Why do I say that? Because these same people here are displaying the same psychosomatic, narcissistic problems as the mob already in there, because they won't work together. Every one of them has to be the chief. No one wants to be the servant to the people. All of them are the same. Brian, all of them. I reached out to Brian early last week. He said, yep, let's have a meeting. He didn't turn up for it. And, you know, because I'm trying to encourage them to talk about the charges he's facing, and I am, talk about unity. Doesn't want to do it. I'm a threat to him, he thinks, right? And then you've got all of these others, every one of them unfit. All of them are unfit. No one should even consider voting for any of those minor freedom political parties, because none of those buggers are prepared to put themselves on the altar of service and say to everybody, what will it take? What will it take for us to come together? Because I tell you what's going to happen, and again, is that everyone's going to panic at the last minute. They're going to go, oh, we're going to waste our vote with all these little parties, and they're going to give it to Winston. Winston's going to sail over the top, become the kingmaker again. And I tell you what, I pray I'm wrong. I hope I'm wrong. But I tell you, I cannot understand that for the life of me why Liz had to form yet another party, a party of one with 4 support people, to dilute and distill down the aggregate freedom vote even more. Leighton Baker has the Leighton Baker Party of one. You've got all the, NZ Democracy, Matt King. Matt King's the only guy really, and I'm not endorsing him, that at least has some semblance of strategic value, because he's already been in the halls of power. I don't trust him. He's still talking about how great National is. right? You've got the Freedom Rights Coalition. You wouldn't trust a man that says he's going to rule New Zealand, would you? That's Brian Tamaki. They're psychotic. Sue Gray.
So there's two questions we have to address here, Billy.
Hold on, Chris, I haven't finished.
Yeah, sure.
Yes, Chris, I don't know. Really, this should have been a discussion for you and I today, Vinny. I'm a little bit annoyed. Nothing against you, Chris, at all, because this is about our arrest, our thing that we're dealing with, right. And this is and how we, you and I, Vinny, in 2020 were warning everybody about this. The conversation that I was having in 2020, all of these clowns in the political freedom movement are talking about the things that I was talking about in 2020 that are now expired in relevancy. Yeah. It's gone way beyond where things were at in 2020, way beyond it. We've got IHRs that are getting ready to come in. We've got the global pandemic preparedness getting ready to come in. We've got climate change laws getting ready to come in to be ensconced into the IHRs and the global pandemic preparedness treaty. And none of these clowns are talking about the depths of that. And and these look, I say it again. We talk about Winston's being unfit. They're all unfit. The way that Liz and Sue conducted the Baby Will case is a travesty that should go down in the history of freedom, politics, and civil liberties arguments today, because they destroyed months of good work that Te Amara Williams had done with the Ministry of Health behind the scenes. Was it about unvaccinated blood or non-vaccinated blood? Was it? No, it wasn't. It was about human rights, the rights of the child, and the rights of the parent, and the greater quality of care argument under the convention, under the UN, strangely enough. And Sue and Liz, they peed all over it. Absolutely did a I'm sorry if people are offended by this. That's just a fact. I always said in 2020, I'll always say it the way I see it, and I'll do my best to make sure before I call it that the observations are as true and strong as they can be. But I'm telling you, this freedom movement, it's not the people in it, the so-called leaders.
Well, Billy, I was only bringing in the point that you two are like the canaries in the coal mine, and there is definitely, when we look at the legal procedure that you've explained to us, there has been conspiracy behind the scenes to attack you because you're threatening the narrative, and that narrative is coming from pretty much all the political class, who, whether they're aware of it or not, are not defending the freedoms that we were standing for. And your case is like a litmus test of that. Even though it's now 2 years on and things have progressed further down the road, my point is that still the same principles stand, and that you two are still innocent of any, from the witnesses that were there, you are innocent of any wrongdoing. And therefore, what this whole thing is a conspiracy as such against the people of New Zealand, and it's driven politically by the very people who are now standing for a re-election. I didn't want to, go any further than that. I thought that was sufficient, because I try to confine myself to our topic that I was invited to be part of, rather than looking at the whole thing. But the so-called freedom movement, unfortunately, you know this, Billy, Jesus said it was the truth that makes us free. It's not freedom that makes us truth. So we've got to get back to truth rather than worrying about freedom, which means pretty much running around with your undies on your head. I think we've got to get down to truth. And what is true? And the truth was already established long ago. We have to live it. And unfortunately, our political people are not living according to any sense of integrity or truth. Otherwise, they'd be there with us. They'd be walking with us, as you said, Billy, serving, not as servants, but as leaders who serve to lift up their own folk. And that is the standard that's required, which has been absent in New Zealand politics for probably 50, 60 years, and has obviously invaded the court system, the police system, the education, the health, and so on, aided and abetted by overseas interests who are doing very well, thank you, out of the misfortunes of the New Zealand people. And one of our big misfortunes is having good folks like you guys being attacked by the police force. And you're at the very lowest level of offensiveness. I mean, you guys even use soap. So, Vinny, that's a joke. And you're not. I mean, in that sense, there's no criminal element. There's no nastiness. There's nothing there. So, and yet the real bad guys are getting away with it all the time, and yet the conspirators, we believe now, are playing with the bad guys. And it's time for a big wake up, whether it be the freedom movement or the minor party. Everyone in New Zealand has got to get out of this mindset, because we lost control of our parliament long ago. Yep, it was stolen from us.
Dead right.
Back in 75, back in the 70s, when the cultural Marxists started learning how to divide us and create these what do you call it, identity politics. And who was the grand queen of identity politics? Helen Clark.
Yeah.
And she opened a portal to bring all this garbage into the country, and the others have been feeding off it ever since. And people like Key play it like foam on the top. They just float around and just play it as they can. We have lost control of our parliament. Our police force, the policemen take an oath, but they're not keeping their oath. They don't know how to anymore, because they get paid by the force. The corporation's paying them, and yet they have a responsibility due to their oath to be part of the community.
Well, Vinny made a good point. Vinny made a good point in the documentary interview I did with him, which is in episode 1. And Vinny, you said that the thing that horrified you, one of the most horrifying and disappointing things for you, was the fact after the arrest, other than for Kiwi and Sue, and other than the Te Māori News that turned up, none of the freedom alternative media or the freedom leaders, not one of them had rung you or certainly didn't contact me to offer any solidarity whatsoever. When what happened to Liz happened, I texted her immediately to say to Liz, I'm so sorry that you were arrested and what you went through. It's a terrible thing. Sending you the best. Keep your chin up. And then we got sentenced to jail. Nothing from anyone. Nothing from and really, it's one thing to have an intellectual grasp of the issues. The other thing is having the heart to go with it. And and we've got a problem with the leaders in this political freedom movement, is that they haven't got a total intellectual grasp of the issues, and they show a very problematic heart, because everybody wants to suck the sabs so hard, and then they want to get their noses in the trough in Parliament. They don't care who they stand on the way up the ladder to try and get there. They don't care what it is. And so you've got all these simpletons, in my view, and I really mean they are. They have to be simpletons. They're fighting over the crumbs while the loaf is being taken away on this locomotive that's coming right at every man, woman, and child on the planet, but in New Zealand. And none of them have the savvy and the heart to say, you know what, I'm going to put myself second, whatever it takes. I've said it before. All they need to do, all these parties is agree on 10 pillar policies. Just pick 10 of them, 6 even, half a dozen, whatever, 6 or 10 policies. Agree on them. Make those essential policy items. Agree on them. Campaign on those. Aggregate the vote, and I guarantee you they'll probably even get 10% or more of the vote. But they are so psychotic around the idea it's got to be me, it's got to be my way or the highway, and boy, I don't care what it takes, it's going to be me. You see, what Sue Gray said about me in 2020 was that I was arrogant and I wouldn't work with another leader. I wouldn't be a co-leader. Next minute, I'm a co-leader with Jamie Lee, co-leader with Michael Stace, and we got smaller other parties that unified into us, like the New Zealand People's Party, fantastic immigrant new Kiwi party, and yet Sue said, "Oh no, I wasn't going to do that," and now of course she's partnered up with the Apostle, and good grief, the tragic irony of this, really almost brings me to tears, because I warned everybody in 2020 about what was coming. And even the other freedom fighters didn't grasp what I was saying then. They've barely grasped what I was saying in 3 years. You got Liz talking about the things I was saying 3 years ago. Winston talking about things I was saying 3 years ago, where everything's now evolved into that next level of tier of authoritarianism, and they're oblivious to it. They're not biting into it all the way to get to the core of it. And if I sound frustrated, I am. I'm deeply frustrated because I know what's ahead of us. I know what's coming.
Billy, I was at this game long before you started.
Yeah, well, you got far.
No, I started in 1978 at the front lines at Puriora Forest. So we've seen all this building. It's the moral collapse of our people is expressed in the type of representation we get, because the failure that you're talking about among these so-called political parties is manifesting in the city councils.
Yeah,
it's manifesting at the school boards. It's manifesting in the church committees. It's manifesting all the way through because there's an inner failure to take responsibility for oneself, for one's relationship, for their families, for their income, for their society. Now, we can all blame the system and say we're all being screwed. And that happens because we have allowed it to happen. We have allowed all these things to happen. And so we're now dealing with a breakdown in the whole artifice of it, because we are not honouring ourselves, honouring the principles that we stand on. We're not honouring anything. We're just going along with it because it's convenient. And this, you want to show us something there, Billy?
Look at this. I'm with Freedom Fighting. Yeah. Look at this. This is from the Whangarei Library. This is the pronouns book.
Right.
These are for kids.
Yeah.
This is the queer and trans 101 guide for kids.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Gay, curious, lesbian. What about this? I'm not a girl. This is the Whangarei Library. What about what about this one by the Todd Foundation? This is the Todd family. I'm all about intersex. Look at that.
Yeah.
This is for kids. Yeah. And look at that. Look at the photos of the characters. Yeah. Their heads aren't attached to the bodies. And you've got that Green MP, that former Green MP, Kiri, over there talking about what it's like to be takatapui, which is in the rainbow community, and she lies and distorts about what takatapui is by in the Māori culture. Now, I'll tell you what takatapui men were used for, gay men were used for in the community, in the Māori community, is that when war parties went away for weeks on end, right? They went. It was tapu to take wahine with you, woman with you, right? So what did they do? They took gay men, takatapui, with them, and used them for sexual relief. That's what they were used for.
Yeah.
They were used for unloading mechanisms. They weren't taonga. She's trying to make out there's some sort of. I'll quote what she says. This is what this woman says. In Māori culture, Rose Pere states intersex people were considered taonga who were sent to teach people something. And then she goes, Elizabeth Kiri adds that we are the modern day embodiment of tipua, magical creatures who could change gender and form. Good grief. What a lot of
this is the sort of spiritual disease, but it started long ago, Billy, and it's now crept up like a gross cancer. Yeah. And it's now the new normal. I mean, look, remember, while we're talking like this, Tamahiri, who I don't really respect, he said something very interesting a while ago. He said, while we normal heterosexual men are at home looking after our families, all those lesbians and gay people, strange people down at the Parliament are plotting and doing dirty deeds behind our backs. And we've already got commitments to our families. So what he was saying was having a normal life meant you couldn't really be a New Zealand political person, because the real political people behind the scenes were living deviant lifestyles and spending all their time plotting the demise of the country while feeding off of us. This is the true nature of the problem. But now it's manifesting on attacks on the children. But the first breakdown was the feminism. Instead, why don't we have familyism? Forget the feminism. All that's crap. It's time to bring back familyism. People are not living happily together. We've got to learn how to get on again. how to form healthy, happy families, because the feminist attack has cut the guts out of the relationships. And what's left? Lonely men look for each other in bars, for God's sake. And then you get this other stuff you're talking about, Billy, brought up as some sort of cultural vomit and spread around the community through this, what you call identity politics. This is the ultimate expression of identity politics. You know, think about these people who say, oh, I'm Maori this, Maori that. Sorry, you've got mixed ancestors. Honour your father and your mother. Talk about both sides, please, not just one, because we're all New Zealanders. That's what Captain Hobson said after we'd signed the treaty. He said, we are one people because we're going to blend together and become one people. And those who would just separate us, who would drive us apart, who would try and separate what God's brought together, are basically satanic. They are anti-human, anti-Christian, anti-family, anti-man, and now we see they're anti-children and anti-creation. So why are we voting for these people? Why can we even bear them in our community? Traitors, treasonous, pederast, people who hate. This is what we're up against. Forget the politics. This is inside the heart of what has become the worst part of New Zealand. It was always there. Now, it has to be cleaned out, In
the American Revolution, I mean, I've spent more time on American radio than I have on New Zealand radio, and I think I'm the only New Zealander in history to have an American talk radio show.
No, me. Sorry, I had one in Miami in 1988, 89 and 90, and it was the Earth Profile of a Planet. Plus, I used to be on Planet Radio in Woodstock, upstate New York. Sorry, Vinny, but that's the truth.
Oh, no kidding. Oh, well.
Yeah.
The only person from New Zealand who got an American radio show while only being in New Zealand. Because when you're in there...
I lived there 15 years, all right.
Yeah, exactly. Well, there you go. I now I have to make it even more specific.
By the way, I interviewed that guy in Dances for Wolves, the
Kevin Costner.
chief, the Indian chief.
Oh, no. Okay, yeah.
Very interesting guy. Anyway, look, Vinny, it's all right, mate. I don't mind. It's not about me. I don't care.
That's all good. That's all good. In either case, I completely forgot what I was saying now. Thank you, Chris.
The United States.
Thank you, Chris. No, I completely forgot what I was saying. So, Billy, take it away. Take it away.
Their constitution, their society.
Oh, yeah, that's right. That's right. The people who actually got together to form the Constitution, and more specifically the Declaration of Independence, because the Declaration of the Independence is probably what would really be considered a moral document, whereas the Constitution was just to constitute a government. And after the Whiskey Rebellion in Philadelphia, then basically the government just became a tyranny, and it's been that way ever since, for lack of a better word, as is all government really at the end of the day. But however, at the time when they were trying to get England off their back, the unnecessary taxation, the real tyranny that they were actually struggling under, they found that a lot of the people who they had to work with, who they had common cause with, were people they didn't like, and in some cases actively hated and didn't want to talk to. But they still came together just because they had to. And according to the stats here, I think it was only about 167 thought leaders, like 167 individuals who were primarily responsible for the bulk of the pro-secessionist propaganda and the philosophy behind the truth and freedom movements of their day, and those people who were supporting the resistance in various means. Only a very small percentage of the population were actively engaged in the war in the first place. It was about maybe 3% of the population, and a further 12% of the population who would be people who might give them a home or a meal or something like that. It gave them tantamount support, resources, etc., not on the front lines, as it say. So that's only 15% of the people to throw off the largest empire that from whom the sun never set. All right, 15% of the people in one country just with their own ideas, and only a few people really doing the bulk of the thinking, and everybody else just kind of getting on with each other despite the fact that they don't want to. Now, we haven't reached that point yet in New Zealand where people are willing to set themselves aside and just go like, look, Vinny, you are not a perfect person. You don't know what you're doing. You don't know what you're talking about. A lot of the time, just shush while the adults are talking. Okay? Nobody pulls you aside and tells you that when you're an adult. Nobody pulls you aside at 18 and says, hey, you know how I was telling you about the things that were bad for you and the things that were good for you as a kid? Yeah? Well, you've got to figure them out now yourself. All right? And people have not grasped this important concept that it's on the points you agree that you can come together and collaborate. The points that you disagree, generally you can leave those debates for another time, particularly when the point you agree on is that ruthless criminal sociopathic scumbaggery plan to enslave and exterminate the human race. Okay? It's only a little thing, okay? And you may not have observed this. It may be news to you, and I don't want to talk down to anybody because it is no surprise to me that you, if I'm talking to you and you don't know what I'm talking about, it is no surprise to me that you don't know, because the measures that have been put in place through every single social strata that you have been a member of for the bulk of your life, predominantly in this country and every other, are of a particular narrative and a particular worldview that is incredibly small and isolating. Now, that isolation that has occurred to you, that repetition of those mindless, boring tasks, that fluorescent lighting, that central authority figure, the people who henpeck you when you speak out of line or ask something that they think is a stupid question. These are cult indoctrinated techniques. When you go into a cult, you don't come out of it. Some part of you is lost, and I believe that this is the exact same process that almost all of us have gone through, whoever we could have been. Whatever our potential was taken from us. It wasn't nurtured, it was sought to destroy, right? And now we're living in the ruins of ourselves, trying to make something with what is left of ourselves, all right? And now we understand why the freedom movement, or the truth movement, as it used to be called, back in the 9/11 protesting days, is so fractured, because every single one of us, in some way, shape, or form, has suffered the trauma that this world has created for the human race under the auspices of the overarching and overruling scumbaggery. And again,
Vinny, your philosophy misses a key point. You don't understand the fallen nature and the fallen spiritual world that influences people and penetrates deeply inside. It's not just that system and big evil guys around the back of the hill.
Yeah, okay.
Individual
that's
people
true.
are
That's
making
true.
bad choices and misbehaving and undermining the actual social capital that their parents invested in them. And I think that Billy made a very good point, showing how this same influence is now penetrating past the parents who aren't united to protect their children anymore. They're all broken and penetrating down to actually damage the little ones. It's the unity of the parents and their morality that makes the family strong and safe. Without that, you've got nothing. You can't say that it's systemic. You're creating a systemic argument, which is back to Rousseau, and it doesn't work that way. We have an individual responsibility, and that's where it starts. And that's where you can actually mend yourself and heal yourself. And Billy knows that. He's a pastor. He's working to help people realise their sin, their mistake, and pay amends for it and rebuild themselves in the process. It's not the system. They made a bad decision. They did something stupid. And the stupidest thing you could do is fight your spouse, break your family, and expose your children to perverts. And that's what's going on at the moment on a huge scale. The failure of marriages is shocking. The failure of community is shocking. And that is what we're dealing with, because until that's established in a better way, we're just going to keep being exploited by people who love to feed on broken filth. And that's really what's going on.
Well,
I'm sorry,
to be honest,
systemic. That's secondary.
Do
and
you
this
believe,
is a classic argument.
Okay,
you have to go back to
if
your
I may,
own soul.
if I may get a word in here, because it's
sure.
kind of important. It's the violation of the basic natural law principles. That is, if you were to sum it up, don't take that which does not belong to you. Now, be that as it may, how all things start within. If you want to change the world, change yourself first and go from there. This is a true and absolute principle. But however, to say that that is the only principle that is at play here is basically counterpoint to what I'm trying to say here, is that's concordant, and that a lot of people understand that principle and are actively seeking to pay the best minds in manipulation, psychology, psychotronic weaponry, and various other myriads of methodologies in order to distract. Can I finish? Just to distract people from the goodness that they could be. All right, so it's acknowledging what the solution is, which is obviously truth, but acknowledging that we're not in the situation right now at this point to get everybody on board with that truth, because the apparatus of spreading words and things of that nature is being severely limited by their systemic methodology of total surveillance. What was it called? A full spectrum dominance. All right. Yeah. So we can't necessarily blame people per se. They are culpable, absolutely, for the choices that they make. But for us to get really terribly upset about it and things of that nature, it's just like, dude, this is now your responsibility. We've told you. Now you know, and now it is your responsibility to change. That's what the meaning of the word controversial is. A piece of information that will make you have a choice to make, whether or not you continue to live your life as you currently do, or whether or not you're going to change it.
I'll go with that.
Well, are we done?
Yes. Okay, now, what are we at? We're at a 1 hour and 7 mark. So we could do some final closing arguments and statements and things of that nature, or we could go for another 27 hours to commemorate the 28 hours that we spent in solitary confinement 2 years ago. I'm up for it. We've got a playlist all lined up, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah, well, look, I had a great night last night with some of our whangare and Northland close family friends of mine, and we looked at the first episode 1 of the documentary. And what does everyone think about it? I'll pay you all that 20 each after this. But you know, up late talking on that. But I've woken up today thinking it's 2 years. It's been terrible to see what it's actually done to you, Vinny. I was quite a chopping up your interview for episode 1 and going through it. Well, you know, it was stink, really was, seeing that. And I've woken up feeling a bit, you know, I guess I just you know, the movement that we've given so much to, you know, we really have. We really have. I mean, you know, even in the early days, through the protests that we're doing, the work that we put into the 2020 campaign, and then the work that we continue to do in 2021, leading up to our arrest on the 18th of August, and then the work since then to now do the documentary and get that out. Apart from a few special people and that have appreciated what we're doing, it's largely a thankless task, and it melted down to, why have we done this? We've done it because it was the right thing to do, and I'm left with this: that what I know now, if I could do it all again, would I do it again? And the answer would have to be an unfortunate yes, because we were compelled to. I was compelled to, because to stand that day, you with me as my dear friend, because it was the right thing to do, and history will judge us both for that. And I do believe that the people that are going to be found wanting once that judgment is complete are going to be the very, very people that have done this to New Zealand society and us along the way, as we fought them to expose the harm that they were doing. And so I've woken up today thinking that was great. We did it for the right reasons. There's no question of that. What I'm as we edge closer to the election date or the poll date, is my complete frustration of looking across the political freedom, political sector, if you like, and to see how very unfit it really is, and unhealthy it truly is, and it almost makes a mockery of what we had done ourselves in some way, because it's kind of like, you don't mind going through what we're going through as long as some people learn from it and get value out of it. And I know a lot of people have, but the key figures that needed to most haven't. And that's why, I'm completely, people get in touch with me all the time. What do you think about this? What do you think about, what do you think that? And I just say to them, look, I have no hope in these people at all that are involved in it. I truly don't. One thing that you missed, Chris, is that Jesus said it himself: whoever shall be the greatest among you, let him be the greatest servant.
That's right.
And that was all I wanted to be in 2020. I was prepared to work with everybody. I didn't need to be the leader.
Keep doing that.
And I was, and
they have their responsibility. You fulfilled yours. That's the key point.
But the thing is this is the point I'm trying to make, is that these people that are in these positions now that are trying to contend for office into Parliament, they haven't displayed anything different to the characteristics that we already have within Parliament. And I always said, and I used to say this on the marae, what I used to speak to in 2020, I used to say, we don't want to replace one bag of nut jobs down in Wellington for another bag of nut jobs, just because they talk about freedom and civil liberties doesn't necessarily equip them to be able to the fullest extent represent people. You can't be all empathy. You've got to have firm and stability, and you've got to know what you're talking about, but you've also got to have the depth of it as well, explored to its nth and its broad degree. And because there's no point in having empathy and melting down when you come across something like the clinical team that was handling baby Will. And we've got that recording of Liz having a meltdown at this clinical surgical team. And if we played that in public, it would be the end of it, because it's just unfit. But the other hand, though, you can't have it all intellectualized, because it then becomes an electoral maneuver rather than one that's governed by character, and good character, heart character, love for the people. It's that old whakatauki in Māori that is, he aha te mea nui o te ao. What is the most important thing in the world? He tangata. It's the people. And only the greatest rangatira in Māoridom in history were the ones were the greatest servants. But it's all that's been lost. And so, but I do want to say one thing, because I've really got to go. But is this, Vinny? You've been, like I said last night in the podcast that we did, you were the first in New Zealand that I knew to be doing the work that you did. And I want to pay tribute to you. You've given a lot for it, and you've been through a lot for it. And so thank you for being strong. I'd love to see a Bible study sometime. Really mean that. And because, there's a reason why this is all happening. It's biblical. We're going to see the reality of that very soon with the climate change work for a day of rest that's coming, which will bring a global Sunday law that is going to take us back to the Middle Ages of persecution, where church and state will unite behind this climate change law. It's Pope Francis that sponsored everything to do with the Intergovernmental Panel for Climate Change. He sponsored COP. He sponsored climate change. He sponsors the UN. He sponsors the WHO. He sponsors the ecumenical programs. And what we are going to see of the Middle Ages is coming back, where the serfs will be the ones that are going to be so much happier because we don't own anything, and the elites will be the lords, the modern day lords, that instead of sitting in castles of bricks and mortar.
Well, Billy, that's all fine, but we've got the Magna Carta and we've got the Bible, we've got a whole lot of other stuff that's our legacy, and it's up to us to pick it up and use it again. That's where it's all together, mate. We've been through this before. We've had nobles taking over. We've had characters running around trying to dominate us, and every time we rise up and we take them out.
No, it's not going to. I know the Bible inside and out in this matter.
I'm sure you do, Billy.
No, hold on. And my Bible tells me
got one here.
My Bible tells me that what is coming will not be stopped. That's why I tell everybody every night.
That's how you interpret it.
No, it's read Revelation 13.
Billy, I've read Revelation every day since I was bloody 20, mate. I understand what you're talking about.
Pal. Come to one of my Bible studies, and you might
Where are you?
Read it.
Are you in the north? Because I'm in Auckland.
No, I'm online. It's an online.
Oh, okay, I'll have a look. Yeah.
But with all due respect, Vinny, this is about you, mate. This is not about anyone else. This is about you and what we've gone through in 2 years. And keep up. Love that little baby, those two babies of yours. Be a good father to them. Be a good man. Get that ring on the finger, and and come up and bring your family up and stay with me and have a break. That's what I'd like to see. All right, love you guys. I've got to roll, and see you soon, eh? Happy anniversary, Vinny.
All the
Cheers,
best,
brother.
See you, bro.
See you, mate.
Radio. See you, Vinny.
All right, cheers, Chris. Catch you later, brother. All right, there we go, ladies and gentlemen. That's the end of the broadcast section with our guests. I'd now like to let you know a little bit about the Day Democracy Died, which was our wonderful documentary. That, man, how many times did I cry frickin' making that documentary? An unbelievable amount of times. Going back through your trauma over and over and over again, don't recommend it. But of course, there was nobody else to do it. So I'm very grateful for the footage that many people took on the day, because it was like over a month after being arrested that I was even able to access the internet to find out what anybody had said. Month and a half. And then I started finding all these videos mocking me and things of that nature. And I was just like, that's a real pain. And I was never able to, defend myself publicly. And by the time a month and a half had gone by, people had moved on to other things. Like I remember Chantel Baker doing such great work, doing coverage down in Wellington and all of that kind of thing, keeping that truth torch shining a little bit. And the day that I was arrested was the day that she started her Facebook page and started doing her lives. The day that I was able to access the internet 6 weeks later, after 15 years of dedicated, talk radio work and YouTubing and having more subscribers than New Zealand Herald TV, which is the largest mainstream media outlet in New Zealand at that time. She had a bigger following than I did in that 6 weeks. And I'd be remiss if I said I wasn't a little bit pissed about that. Just more like a professional jealousy, kind of thing. Oh man, wish I was a beautiful young woman sometimes. It would make my job so much easier, But they got an expiration date, women do, as the MGTOW people call it the wall. At a certain point where that really, really beautiful woman who's all bubbly and stuff like that, as soon as she hits that wall, she's never going to be as attractive as she once was, and people aren't going to put up with her zany behavior anymore. It was just like, oh, wow, that's tremendously unfortunate thing to know, but it is true. It is true, isn't it? And that's why women spend so much money on their moisturizers and their cleansers and their pore exfoliators, whatever umpteen layers of Botox and so on and so on. They're just trying to keep themselves pretty so that people will put up with them. And it's like, you know, lady, maybe you need to just work on your personality just a little bit, and maybe looks aren't that important because one day they're going to go anyway, and you want to be with somebody that you love who treats you nice. So maybe learn to love and treat people nice. You know, wouldn't that be a great, a wonderful idea? And this is what Chris was saying earlier about how feminism's kind of destroyed the family unit and things of that nature. You know, chauvinism. Open the door for the woman, pull out a chair for her, pay for everything, and take care of her and protect her. Right? That's chauvinism. Like, that's such a bad thing. It's toxic masculinity. You know, you got to be kidding me, bro. And I just would like to acknowledge, you know, as much as we say that we didn't have any, you know, people helping us out or giving us coverage and things like that during this terrible storm that occurred, there was a few people, you know, and of course DK Spiracy would be remiss and be like, you didn't mention me, man. Yes, DK, he gave me a call and talked to me and stuff like that. And what we're more like referring to as those people who already had like established platforms and things like that and big reach and whatnot. I mean, we love DK, we do, but it's very difficult to get a whole lot of reach when in some cases you get kicked off video platforms like Kick before you've even done any streaming. You got kicked off because he applied for an account. You know, and these are the people that I've got supporting me, you know, and they are the best people in the world. And as far as I'm concerned, it's all of those guys out there who are just doing their own thing and just going, nah, it's truth or hell, mate. And I'm heading towards the truth, and do whatever you can with whatever resources you got. That's the human spirit, mate. Okay, you bottle that up and drink it, you get messed up. Nobody knows what DK stands for. I can't say it on radio. Anyway. The other point that I'd like to make here about, you know, the arrest and subsequent bail conditions and stuff like that is it changes you as a person, you know, trauma, and physically, you know, it affects you. You know, my health has went down significantly since that happened, and you know, emotionally and also socially. I think because of the lockdowns and all of that kind of stuff, and my band leaving and what have you, I really wasn't, and I think I still am not currently capable of really talking to people like face to face and communicating and being relaxed and all of that kind of thing. It still feels uncomfortable for me. Like, I remember at one point it was, you know, entirely comfortable and it was all good. And now it's just, there's a little bit in the back of your mind going, need to be alone or something like that. You know, it's weird. And I don't like it, you know, frankly. I really do want to have more people to talk to and be around and stuff like that. But my brain's just telling me, you know. I don't know if anybody else has been receiving that kind of feedback from the universe post huge quantities of lockdown and spending time alone, or locked in with your family, sort of thing, which can be very lonely, I guess, sometimes, depending on the family. So I would like to get people to go to that documentary, The Little Day Democracy Died. I'm going to pop that in the chat here for you guys to watch and share. It's up on BitChute and Rumble and a number of other places. So all the links are available in the archive page of the Vinny Eastwood Show.com. And, of course, the big blue banner there, the Day Democracy Died banner. So, guys, if you would be so kind as to go and watch that and share it out and stuff. After, getting taken off of YouTube, it's extremely difficult to get, views on anything important. I mean, maybe it's just not fast-paced or anything enough. I was traumatized when I was making it. Give me a break, guys. But Billy's documentary, River of Lies, the New Zealand Scamdemic and Investigative Documentary. You can see that Billy was wearing his T-shirt there, and I'm wearing this one here too. So that's finally going to be coming out on September the 9th, I believe. And the verdict for our case is going to be out around October the 10th. So Billy wants to be around and touring at that time to try and promote that documentary. Indeed, we still have the petition up on change.org, Justice for Billy TK and Vinny Eastwood. Would really love people to go there and click on that and share it around as well. Sign it if you haven't signed it already, of course, because it's very important, I think, to just have that little bit of showing of support. Man, these guys have got nearly 13,000 people worldwide given them signatures to say that they need to have justice. Speaking of justice, it'd be unjust for me to not give my sponsors who've been sponsoring me since my arrest, holdenhealthcare.com and reopen.nz, for sponsoring me. Reopen.nz is a directory of anti-mandate, pro-choice, all-inclusive businesses in New Zealand. Really love if you've got a freedom business, ladies and gentlemen, regardless of what you're doing, go to reopen.nz and add your freedom business today and join the massive freaking list of people that are all over the place, all over the country, and doing all sorts of different things that are really quite brilliant at what they do, including having a little bit of love of their freedom, baby. So the other health problems that I was talking about, that I've been having related to stress and diet and what have you, and been treated by holdenhealthcare.com. David Holden I've known for many years. I've even got a 2009 Uncensored Symposium thing that I've got on the wall there where David Holden did a presentation. I've known him for that long. What was that? 2009, 11 plus. It's like 14 years or something like that. Almost as long as I've been doing what I'm doing, I've known of David Holden. And now he's treating me, which is great. And he's treating me very well. It's very nice. And go to holdenhealthcare.com, ladies and gentlemen. And also the Vinny Eastwood Show is a donor supported broadcast. So if you want to give us a gift weekly or monthly or just a one-off, there are PayPal buttons and Patreon and KiwiBank and what have you on the donate tab of the Vinny Eastwood Show.com. That's the Vinny Eastwood Show.com. And speaking of which, I just need to check something because somebody told me VinnyEastwood.com was down, and yeah, it's still down. It's unfortunate. That's a redirect, which is so much easier to put on the show tabs and things like that. But now it's the VinnyEastwoodShow.com. And I would like people to check out some of my music as well. Vinny and the Vendettas, the Vendettas music tab on the VinnyEastwoodShow.com. You can listen to Jar Jar Jacinda by Vinny and the Vendettas and have a few laughs. Everybody Wants to Be Mexican, Luftwaffe Aloft, and we've got all sorts of demos and things of that nature on here. All very good music, even if I do say so myself, and worked very hard on all of that kind of thing. So now that the band's broken up, I think we've got like about 700 songs, maybe recordings anyway, about 80 songs that could be good enough for an album. So we're looking for a producer and for people to help us out there by helping to maybe form a new band. So if you're a guitarist or a drummer or a backup vocalist or something like that, if you can play an instrument and you can jam and you can have a good time and you're easy to get along with, but you can do the work and that kind of thing, it'd be lovely to be able to meet your acquaintance and help make some music together. Because a lot of these songs, in fact, pretty much all of the songs that I do, they're just freestyled out. So you come up with choruses and verses and all of that kind of stuff off the cuff. That's how I do it, and people basically don't really see that kind of thing outside of 8 Mile, and so it's interesting. It's very strange to see it sung and done rather than rapped. But speaking of which, that is a wrap, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for your time and attention. I'd like you all to give yourself a wee pat on the back. All right, you've been good people. All right, there's very few people who really listen to the show regularly, if any, who are bad people. All right, just decent people wanting to get through the day and need some terrible jokes in order to do it. It's a very special breed, and I feel absolutely privileged that you would consider me worth listening to. And just remember, this information doesn't necessarily benefit me putting it out and stuff like that. No, it's costing me everything. That's what the truth really does. It strips you down and it takes everything that's not necessary away from you to a large degree. And so it's hard learning it. And I know I've been there, I've done that, and I can't help you. All right? You have to help yourself. You have to find what it is that helps you to maintain stability while everything is crumbling. And for each person, it's different. As long as you're not hurting anybody or damaging any property, it's your right. It's your right to live how you want. And that is the truth. So, with that being said, thank you very much, ladies, gentlemen, slaves of the global plantation. The Vinny Eastwood Show is bad news. It's like the news, but so much worse. It's the lighter side of genocide. Just because we're being exterminated doesn't mean we can't enjoy it. Otherwise, what's the point of being killed? The Vinny Eastwood Show. We're the only thing worse than living in a high-tech global police state run by child trafficking Satanists is Vinny's jokes.